Well, hello friends and welcome to Hoenn. Today I want to attempt a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Emerald using only the Dragon type, a type that is often considered overpowered because of its resistances to common moves like Electric, Water, and Fire. I am here to tell you though, in Generation 3 at least, the Dragon type is not overpowered. We have 5 total encounters that we could possibly get, and 4 of them are quad weak to Ice. The lack of physical special split also makes things very interesting with Pokemon like Flygon and Salamence, who are very heavy physical attackers. We're going to have to do some mixed attack EV training to make these Pokemon viable to the end of the game. Hoenn's Ice-type coverage at the end of the game is going to make things very difficult, and I can't wait to see how this run plays out. If we take a look at the encounters available to us, it's not until we get to Route 114 after we defeat Watson that we could get our hands on a Swablu, which isn't even a dragon until we evolve it into an Altaria. After defeating the 4th gym, we can make our way to Route 111 with the Go Goggles and get our hands on a Trapinch, which again is not a dragon type until it evolves into a Vibrava. After that, we could eventually get our hands on a Horsea as we're heading towards the 7th gym, but we'd have to do a lot of work to get the evolutionary item, which is a 5% chance hold on Horseas or Bagons, and then trade it to get a Kingdra eventually. And speaking of Bagon, we can't get it until we have access to Waterfall, so it makes this run technically impossible. However, you guys know I like to do things a little bit on the impossible side, and we're going to make these encounters available to us as dragons. I'm not going to use Trapinch, I'm not going to use Swablu. With that being said, Dratini and Bagon are the 2 Pokemon that are unevolved, so I'm going to hit a random number generator to see which one is going to be the starter, and then we'll give ourselves the other one after we defeat the first gym. I will then give myself the Vibrava after we beat the 2nd gym, and then it's not going to be until after we defeat Winona and her flying types before I give myself the fully evolved Pokemon like Altaria and Kingdra, but eventually we will have all 5 Pokemon and try to take on the likes of Hoenn. We could have used the Universal Randomizer to change one of these Pokemon into either the Dratini or the Bagon, but I decided against that. I do want to use an egg move on each one of these Pokemon that we have access to just to give ourselves a little bit of an edge. The move pools are very shallow on some of these Pokemon. Dragon-type moves are very hard to come by, so that is the decision I made. Grabbing the Torchic, we're going to throw it in the box, we'll do the tutorial stuff with it, get our first official starter. The run doesn't technically start until after we've defeated the rival anyway, and she gives us some Pokeballs when we're back in the professor's lab. So, with all of that being said, let's make our way to the rival battle and get this run underway. And of course, this is Pokemon Emerald. We have 2 rivals in this game, neither of which are going to be very difficult, but in our heads, we've had to nickname them Algorithm because we can't really nickname them. Both of our rivals in this game are very easy to defeat, but the real life Algorithm is not. And just like I say every week, I need your help. And how can you help, you may ask? It is very simple. You can like the video, you can comment, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and of course, share this video. I did make the mistake of saying share this with your friends, and then in the last episode, I said share it with a random stranger. I don't care what you do, just share it. And then people were telling me that they're airdropping it to a bunch of people, so that's peak. Oh, that is awesome. Now, I will say that the last 40 minutes, 40, for the last 2 clips is what it took to actually get them done. I was struggling with the first 2 clips because I don't write a script. Writing a script would probably make these things a little bit faster, but I prefer the more natural feel to these videos, and I like to leave in little flub ups like that because people are like, oh, you made a mistake, and comments are great for the algorithm. Now, rolling the random number generator, we get Eric the Bagon with a serious neutral nature. This is our first official starter. It has Bite, Rage, and Dragon Rage. Now, I know Dragon Rage is going to make the early game a little bit overpowered, but this move does die off rather quickly. Dratini could have had Dragon Rage if I wanted it as an egg move as well. We did box up all of these Pokemon and have them ready for the run. They're all ready, they're all nicknamed, there is a name theme. Can you guys guess it? And of course, as I said before, Dratini and Bagon are the only two unevolved Pokemon, so that's what we're going to start with. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting run, but with Dragon Rage on Eric, we should be able to steamroll the first gym leader. Going up against Roxanne with Eric and having an access to a move like Dragon Rage is going to make things very easy. We are going to one-shot every single one of her Pokemon doing set 40 damage because none of them have over 40 health. I did say that Dragon Pokemon are not overpowered, and I'm proving that incorrect, but trust me when I say that Dragon Rage falls off rather rapidly after the second gym, and things get very difficult in this run. This is not a walk in the park like you might think it is. It's going to be very interesting with what happens. Of course, it's a 3 in, 3 out for Roxanne, and a very easy gym badge for us this first time. We can now get our hands on our second encounter, Dratini named Dustin, and has a brave plus attack and minus speed nature. That's not great, but having access to the egg move Dragon Breath is going to be very nice. Leaving Rustboro, our rival challenges us to a battle. You can tell her no, and sidestep and just make your way to Dewford, never worrying about it again. However, because I gave her a Mudkip, I knew she was going to have a Torkoal, so I wanted to take this battle on because that Torkoal has Curse and things can get dicey. Luckily for us, Dustin does have Dragon Breath instead of only access to Wrap, so we can do a little bit of damage, but it does look like Dragon Breath is going to be about a 4-shot. However, our rival is greedy and just keeps setting up curses, so it is what it is. I don't think that Brawly is going to be very difficult. We do need to do as much training as possible. I don't want to sit here and wipe this early, so that's why we're taking on this battle. The greeniness of our rival pays off as a 4th Dragon Breath connects and takes out the Torkoal. This just leaves her Mudkip, and as it comes out, we fire off a Dragon Breath and we get a Paralysis. Very nice. However, Mudkip is going for Bide. So we switch it up for a Leer as to not build this thing's energy, and then it gets paralyzed. Being that it was fully paralyzed, that breaks the Bide, so I go for Dragon Breath, taking this thing to about a 1/3 as it hits us with a Mud Slap, lowering our accuracy. That's annoying, but we break through and take it out with one more Dragon Breath. After a little bit of travel, we find ourselves in the second gym taking on Brawly in his fighting types. I didn't want to go with the Dragon Rage strat, so I lead Dustin and Dragon Breath, which does well over half of Machop's health. A bulk up is perfectly fine. We can fire off another Dragon Breath, taking out the Machop with a little bit of overkill from a critical hit. Of course, that didn't matter. Meditite then comes out. This thing only has Focus Punch, so as long as we attack it, we win, and after a couple of Dragon Breath, we do take the Meditite down, leaving only the Makuhita. We hit it with a Dragon Breath that takes Makuhita to half health, and it gets the Paralysis. That is awesome. However, it breaks through Paralysis to hit us with a nasty Vital Throw down to 21 HP. This does activate our Oran Berry, bringing us up to 31 HP, and then Citrus Berry activates on the Makuhita, fully healing it up. Another Dragon Breath takes it back down to half health, and then it stays paralyzed. A second Dragon's Breath unfortunately doesn't quite KO the Makuhita, leaving it on a sliver, but we do get very lucky with another full Paralysis. Super Potion pulls Makuhita up to just below full health, and then 2 Dragon Breaths back to back take out the Makuhita, winning us a fairly easy second gym badge. I do decide to let myself have Jamie the Vibrava that has a timid plus speed and minus attack nature. I know this may seem a little bit cheeky giving ourselves a ground type just before we take on the electric type gym leader, but let me tell you, this doesn't honestly matter. We do have a normal move set because this thing doesn't have any egg moves, so things are going to get a little bit tricky. After delivering the letter to Stephen Stone, did you guys know that rather than using the escape rope or backtracking, you can just hop these couple of ledges? I didn't know that. Not until a couple of runs ago did I realize that was a thing. Saves myself a little bit of time. And before taking on Watson, we of course have the infamous rival battle on Route 110. Now, I didn't really train up the team. They're all sitting at level 21 because I didn't think she would be much of a challenge. Nature Power Swift from Lombre doesn't do much, and Dragon Breath is going to be a 3-shot. Astonish is a little bit weird, but gets a critical hit doing a decent bit of damage, and then we can take out the Lombre. This brings out Slugma, and because I'm sitting below half health, I decide to swap into Eric on a Rock Throw. We tank it fairly nicely and then fire off a Dragon Rage that doesn't KO the Slugma. I told you that move does run out quickly. Ember doesn't do much to us, and then a Bite takes it out, leaving only her Marsh Stomp. I do swap it up for a Headbutt, doing a decent amount of damage and getting the flinch. Thinking I have it in range of a Dragon Rage, we fire one off, but it leaves Marsh Stomp at a sliver, and then we get hit with a Mud Shot, taking us down to 17 HP. Because of the speed drop, even though we activate our Oranberry, I do decide to swap into Jamie, who swaps in on a Water Gun, which is a little bit annoying. But we fire off a Bite, taking out the Marsh Stomp, winning a relatively easy rival battle. Watson and his Electric-type Pokemon should never be taken lightly. The Voltorb outspeeds the entire team and will one-shot Jamie and Dustin with a self-destruct. A Spark is resisted very nicely from Eric, and then we fire off a Headbutt that does well over half. Now, a self-destruct is a range to KO us at this health, but it opts to go for Spark, and we take it out with one more Headbutt. Little bit risky, but I had no choice. As the Electrike comes out, our Oranberry activates, healing us up to 39 HP, and then Shockwave takes us to 23 HP. A critical Headbutt takes out the Electrike, and Magneton is third out. Baiting a Shockwave, we swap into Jamie, who is immune to the incoming Shockwave, and this is where things get interesting. We fire off Rock Smashes that are quad super effective. We do get the defense drop, which is going to happen, but Magneton opts to go for Thunder Wave. I do believe this is because the AI in Generation 3 is always about speed control. We outspeed the Magneton, so it's trying to get the speed advantage, but we're immune. The AI doesn't care about that, it's going to continuously do it. This means that we can fire off Rock Smashes and try to get the Magneton low, and we can burn up the Super Potions of Watson before we take on the Manectric, so we have a better chance because I am at risk to lose one or more of these Pokemon in this battle. Watson does use that first Super Potion, and we continue firing off Rock Smashes. Again, this is a little hard to gauge because we've gotten a couple defense drops, so looking at the health that we're at, or the health that Magneton has left, we're going to continue to fire those off. This defense drop puts it in possible range of one more Rock Smash taking it out. Luckily for us, it hangs on with a sliver of health. I know that sounds weird, but this is going to make sure that Watson uses up that second Super Potion, which is very, very critical. Now we can continue to fire off Rock Smashes, and this time we take Magneton below half health. It wasn't at full health, but still, that's quite awesome. Another defense drop is fine, and I decided to switch it up for Sand Tomb, which maybe was a mistake. I could have just taken this thing out with another Rock Smash, but I wanted to use the Stab super effective move. It's only 70 accuracy, so of course we miss it 2 times in a row before we finally connect, taking the Magneton out, albeit a critical hit. As the Manectric comes out, things get a little dicey. I know it's going to go for Howl to boost its quick attack damage, and I'm going to go for Sand Attack. And Shockwave doesn't affect us, so it's going to go for Howl until it can start really doing some damage. It gets off 3 Howls, and I fire off 4 Sand Attacks and tank a quick attack in the process. This drops us down to 29 HP, and it's at -4 accuracy before our Oranberry activates, pulling us up to 39 HP. I am risking some crits here, as Manectric goes for a Thunder Wave, which we're immune to, but our first Rock Smash procs its static ability. That's poetic. Manectric then misses its next quick attack, and we hit it with another Rock Smash that gets another defense drop very, very nicely. Quick attack then connects, dropping us to 7 HP before we connect with another Rock Smash and have to switch out. I bring in Dustin, and things are a little bit risky because Quick Attack drops us to 16 HP. Our Oranberry activates, but we do not live another Quick Attack, and I've got to risk it. Quick Attack misses. We connect with Thunder Wave. Very nice. Manectric stays paralyzed. It still outspeeds us even though it is paralyzed, and we can fire off a Dragon's Breath. That drops it into Citrus Berry range, which pulls this thing up almost to full health. Manectric then stays paralyzed. We fire off another Dragon Breath, dropping it to just above half health. Manectric misses another Quick Attack. Dragon's Breath connects, dropping this thing to low health. Quick Attack misses again. Dragon's Breath drops it into low red health. And one more full paralysis seals the deal as one more Dragon's Breath connects, and that was beyond lucky. Unfortunately, it isn't until after you beat Watson that you can use Rock Smash outside of battle to where we can get to this house just outside of Fall Arbor Town to where we can get our hands on the Dig TM, which would have been a hell of a super effective move for Jamie in that battle. And even with the Dig TM in hand, Jamie is still not going to be able to hold her own here in the battle with Flannery, and despite her Fire-type Pokemon, this is a tricky battle. A maximum return with the Silk Scarf is enough to one-shot the Numel. That was a critical hit too, so that of course is enough to one-shot the Numel. We gain a level here. We had to do a lot of preparation for this battle. Slugma comes out and it falls to a single return, just barely, and then next is the Camerupt. I fire off a return, it is not going to one-shot, and Camerupt luckily uses Attract. I know that sounds weird, but I do not want it to set up a sunny day. We do break through the Infatuation to fire off another return, knocking out the Camerupt. Now the Torkoal is very scary because he can knock out both Eric and Jamie with a super-powered Overheat. Luckily the sun's not out, and Dustin, being a little bit more bulky on the special side, survives one just below half health. Unfortunately for us, the minus to special attack is cured off with the held White Herb. There was not much we could do to get rid of that thing, but we were smart and prepared, putting an Oran Berry on Dustin. This means we can survive another attack. I do need to get off a Thunder Wave, so we have a chance at some paralysis, and we get one off as Torkoal goes for Attract. That's actually perfect. It didn't go for anything else. I know at this point we're baiting in a Body Slam, so I swap into Eric, who does in fact take that Body Slam very nicely because we have a high physical defense. And now Torkoal should go for Overheat, so I swap back into Dustin. It does in fact go for Overheat. Barring a crit, we survive, and we make it on 5 HP. This means its special attack is very, very low, so we can go ahead and swap in Jamie. Jamie swaps in on a full paralysis. I need to do a little bit of chip damage with Bite, which is perfectly fine, and then Torkoal opts to go for Body Slam, which gets the paralysis. Damn it. I have to go for Dig, there's nothing else I can do. Luckily for us, we break through 2 potential paralysis to knock this thing below half health with a Dig, and then Torkoal stays paralyzed as we go for one more Dig, breaking again through all of those paralysis to connect with a Dig, beating out the Torkoal and winning us the 4th gym badge. These last 2 gyms have tried my patience and my heart. I need to take a breather. Before taking on our dad Norman, though, we get a couple of evolutions, starting out with Eric evolving into a Shelgon. And next we have Dustin evolving into a pretty beastly Dragonair. Nice little middle evolution for the entire team. Our deadbeat dad Norman, the normal trainer, he's not going to be as difficult as the last 2 gyms. His team is very easy to work around with the team that we have. Spinda likes to go for Teeter Dance, but we have Stab Dig, and Stab Dig is going to do just over half of Spinda's health. A Teeter Dance connecting is annoying because it does get the confusion. However, I was smart enough to grab some Person Berries on Route 114 so we can cure off that said confusion. Now we can go for another Dig, knocking out the Spinda. Vigoroth is a nasty little Pokemon, but we do outspeed it and go for Dig. We connect, doing a decent amount of damage, but not quite half. Facade then takes us to 39 HP. I know that this thing can knock us out if it crits, but I need to risk it, and I go for Rock Tomb, which connects and gets the lowered speed. Facade then puts us at 9 HP before I swap into Dustin. We get hit with a Facade on the swap in, which is a little bit scary, but we can take it out with a Dragon Breath. Lanoon then comes out, and worried that we're going to be knocked out from a Facade, I swap into Eric. Eric tanks it very well, and then can fire off a return that takes Lanoon low. Norman then opts to go for a Hyper Potion, and another return drops it low. We get hit with another Facade, dropping us to 23 HP before a return finishes off the Lanoon. I was really hoping that thing was going to go for Belly Drum. Slacking comes out, and this is where things are easily cheesed because we learned Protect as we evolved. We can Protect on the attacking turns and then attack on the loafing turns. Slacking does outspeed us, which is a bit scary, but as long as we stay the course, we will win. Dragon Rage does do a decent amount of damage, but I also want to see what Return does. They look like they're doing about the same. We do activated Citrus Berry, and continue going for Protect. Another round of Dragon Rage, Protect, Dragon Rage, Protect, eventually drops Slacking low enough to where Norman uses up his second Hyper Potion. Then it's just more of Protect, Return, Protect, Return, Protect, and eventually take this thing out. Luckily, we had just enough Protect PP to win us the 5th gym badge. Now that we have access to Surf, we're kind of cruising through Mauville to head towards Winona and the 6th gym, but Watson wants us to do a little side quest to shut off the generator, and for that he gives us the TM for Thunderbolt. That is a great move to give to Dustin just before taking on the flying type gym trainer, so we're going to go do it. After the Weather Institute on Route 119, we have a rival battle with Algo. This is going to be the last time I fight her. Fake Out is annoying, but then it's Dragon Breath and Swifts back and forth. A rock throw from Slugma takes Dustin low, but we survive, and then we can swap in Eric to take out the Marsh Stomp. I'm not going to battle her in Lily Cove. It's just too easy. And speaking of easy, we have Winona and her flying types. Now, I did have to do a little bit of grinding to get our hands on enough coins for the Ice Beam TM, but Thunderbolt that we got from doing the side quest with Watson doesn't quite one-shot the Swablu. And then Swablu goes for Mirror Move, so there is a chance for paralysis here that would make things very, very annoying. Luckily, it doesn't happen. Winona burns a Hyper Potion, and then we fire off another Thunderbolt. That doesn't quite KO the Swablu, leaving it on a sliver, so one more takes it out. This means that Altaria is going to come out next. It goes for Dragon Dance, and a quad super effective Ice Beam takes that thing out in a single hit. That's why we went through all that trouble. Tropius then comes out, and it too falls to a quad super effective Ice Beam. Next up is Pelipper, and Pelipper does what it does best, going for Protect, but eventually we do connect with a quad super effective Thunderbolt, and we've easily made it to her last Pokemon, Skarmory. Thunderbolt connects, doing well over half, and then Skarmory does what it does best, going for Sand Attack. But Dustin, being the absolute unit, breaks through the -1 and takes it out with one more Thunderbolt. A relatively easy 6th gym. And at this point, I think it's okay to start giving ourselves the fully evolved Pokemon like Sweetlou, the Altaria with a naughty plus attack and minus special defense nature. Can you guys guess the name theme yet? This one might be tricky for some and might be really easy for others. And speaking of difficulty for others, next up we have Tate and Liza, which has always been a difficult battle for us. I think I've had a couple of easy runs against these guys, but this time we had to do quite a bit of planning. The plan is to take out this Xatu as fast as possible, because after it sets up a Calm Mind, it should be able to one-shot almost my entire team. Ice Beam does take it low, and then it does set up an aforementioned Calm Mind, but that's too late, as a Crunch from Jamie takes it out. Because we avoid the Earthquakes with Levitate, as the Lunatone comes out, Claydol just sets up a Light Screen. Also, too late. I do pivot Jamie out and bring Dustin in as we go for an Ice Beam against the Lunatone, which gets the freeze. That's awesome. And then Sweetlou gets hit with a Psychic from Claydol. Lunatone stays frozen. Now we're going to start focusing our attacks on the Claydol. We're going to pivot Jamie back in and hit an Ice Beam on the Claydol. We should have been baiting an Earthquake, which we did. Very nicely done. Lunatone stays frozen. Again, we're going to pivot into Dustin and hit an Ice Beam on the Claydol, dropping it pretty low, and then Claydol claps back with a critical hit Psychic onto Dustin. A little bit scary. Lunatone stays frozen. Our Citrus Berry heals us up a little bit, and knowing that we're going to take the Claydol out, I don't swap this time, taking it out with an Ice Beam from Sweetlou, and then as the Soul Rock comes out, it gets hit with an Ice Beam from Dustin. Lunatone stays frozen. The Light Screen finally wears off, and I'm going to go ahead and pivot Dustin out, bringing Jamie back in as we go for an Ice Beam on the Soul Rock, dropping it pretty low. Lunatone stays frozen, and Soul Rock sets up the Sun. Okay. That's actually perfect. Citrus Berry activates for the Soul Rock, and now, since the Sun is up, we can fire off a much stronger Solar Beam to knock out the Soul Rock. We then hit a Crunch on the Lunatone, dropping it to half, and Lunatone stays frozen. This activates its Citrus Berry perfectly fine, because then we can fire off a one-turn Solar Beam, knocking out the Lunatone, and that freeze was absolutely clutch. And our last encounter is a Kingdra named Matt. It has a careful plus special defense and minus special attack nature. It does have the egg move Aurora Beam, and the naming theme are the characters from the movie Grind. If you've never seen that movie, it's a really good skateboarding movie from the early 2000s. Now, it's been a little while since we just did a talkie portion, and as we head to the Team Aqua hideout to kind of round out the Magma Aqua storyline stuff, I wanted to bring you guys in and chat for just a little bit. As some of you know, I travel quite a bit for work, and it's that time of year again where I'm on the road right now as I'm doing this voiceover for this clip. And when this video does come out, I will be sitting in a hotel room. I've been putting up YouTube videos for quite a long time now, and I would say at least 50% of those have been from the seat in a hotel room. That does make things a little lonely, and it does make things a little bit difficult, and life on the road is not easy. However, I have a buddy that has gone with me on a few of these jobs. He's been running around for a few years, I should say, with us, and has recently had a child, less than a year old, and we're talking about the different stuff because he's getting to enjoy all those firsts. But being on the road, traveling for a job, you're going to miss out on it. Luckily, this job, we were down here for a week, then we were home for a week, then we were down here for what is going to culminate into possibly 3 weeks. That's not that long, but there are other jobs that do stretch out quite a bit longer. And in the 14 years or so that I've been doing this, I've been gone for 7-8 months at a time. And it's very, very difficult. Whilst we were talking, I made a comment to him that I didn't really fully grasp the gravity of what I had said until much, much later, where I was sitting in the hotel room and kind of decompressing. I said to him, I'm not a deadbeat dad, but I definitely didn't raise my kids. Now, sure, my wife would send me pictures of their homework, and we would sit on the phone and we would do that, talk, different stuff, but there's only so much you can do. The day in and day out stuff, the everyday things, I wasn't there to deal with a good portion of that. And now that I've been doing this for almost 15 years as far as the traveling stuff, sure, the money is right. That's why I keep doing it, right? I definitely wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for that. But now that my kids are getting older, I too am getting to the point where, like my buddy, I think at some point we're going to have to put an end to this. I miss the day in and day out with the wife. It's mostly just her and I at the house a good portion of the time, and her being home alone during part of the week is worrisome for me, just because there's nobody there with her in case something happens. I mean, I got a couple of dogs, but they're just going to sit there and stare, because they're family pets. But anyway, as my buddy was telling me about the different things that he's worried about missing, it all resonates, and you never really know the gravity of some situations until you've lived them yourself. But even then, I wasn't trying to take away from what he's going through. More or less, I love hearing the stories of what his kid's doing and the firsts and stuff, because I do miss that age. You do. Once your kids start growing and going, sure, having an empty nest is very nice, but also it's very quiet. I don't hear my son playing guitar anymore. I don't hear the hustle and bustle running around the house, and it's sad, but it's also happy. So I tend to live vicariously through these other friends of mine that are younger and having kids and stuff, and just kind of feed off of it, man. Anyway, the whole point of this whole story was to say that, if you're on the road, you're traveling for work, you're away from your family, I feel for you. Don't forget to give your loved ones a hug and a kiss the next time you see them, because you miss out on so much, Sometimes my wife does get a little annoyed, like, geez, man, all right, that's enough hugging and kissing and stuff. But I've missed so many. I'm just trying to make up for the missed ones. Keep your head up. I love you all. Let's get on with the run. So after the Team Aqua and Team Magma stuff, and after the Titans go and battle and waking up Rayquaza to put an end to it, we can then talk to these two numbskulls that are literally like, haha, maybe we're trying to do something that we couldn't do or we shouldn't have done, and they're just like, ha 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 ha, no harm, no foul. Deuces. A kid had to stop them ignorant fools. Crazy. Right before we take on Juan and his water types, we have an evolution with Jamie evolving into a Flygon. Very nice. The last gym leader, Juan, and his water types could be a little bit disastrous for the team. His Love Disc can put us to sleep, it can confuse us with Water Pulse. Luckily, it doesn't go for sleep, nor does it get the confusion with Water Pulse. A single Thunderbolt is going to be enough to take out the Love Disc, but out next is going to be Kingdra. That spells a problem. With super effective Ice Beam and potentially using Rest, that thing can be a monster to deal with. I could swap out and use any of the other Pokemon, but I decided to leave Dustin in, and Kingdra opts to go for Double Team. That is perfectly fine. A Dragon Breath from Dustin takes this thing below half, and if Kingdra goes for a Rest, this will be annoying, but it opts to go for Double Team, which also can be annoying. But Dustin, being the unit that he is, breaks through the -2 and takes it out with one more Dragon's Breath. This brings out Celio, and we've only taken a sliver of health. This thing has Stab Ice moves, but I fire off a Thunderbolt that unfortunately doesn't get the KO. So we have to tank a Stab Aurora Beam that does drop us below half. A critical hit actually would not have taken us out. Citrus Berry heals us up just a little bit before Juan uses a Hyper Potion, and then of course back-to-back Thunderbolts take out the Celio. Out next for Juan is his Whiscash, so I swap into Sweet Lou as Whiscash goes for Rain Dance. I set up the Sun, and Whiscash goes for Amnesia. Even with the +2 to its special defense, a quad super effective Solar Beam drops this thing to a sliver. It then sets up a little bit more with another Amnesia, and Juan goes for his second Hyper Potion. A quad super effective Solar Beam drops Whiscash below half there, and one more takes it out. This just leaves his Crawdont, which unfortunately gets outsped and one-shot from a single turn Solar Beam, winning us the 8th and final gym badge. Just before making it to the Elite Four, we have a couple of evolutions on the team, starting with Eric at level 50 evolving into a beastly Salamence. I hate the fact that dragons evolve so late, but this is a very welcome addition. Now, right before heading into the Elite Four and right at the level cap of level 55, we have a beastly evolution with Dustin evolving into a Dragonite. We go from being 2 times weak to Ice-type moves to being 4 times weak, but it's a trade-off, I think, that is worth it. And here is the team, all leveled up and ready to take on the Elite Four. We have Eric the Salamence with Return, Bite, Dragon Claw, and Brick Break. Jamie the Flygon with Crunch, Dragon Breath, Earthquake, and Giga Drain. Dustin the Dragonite with Thunderbolt, Dragon Breath, Ice Beam, and Flamethrower. Matt the Kingdra with Surf, Protect, Toxic, and Ice Beam. And rounding out the team is Sweet Lou the Altaria with Parasong, Sunny Day, Solar Beam, and Dragon's Breath. Sydney is never typically difficult in these Elite Four runs, and this time is no different. I do lead Sweet Lou against the Mightyena to soak up the Intimidate, and I figure rather than swapping into Eric, I'm just going to stay in and see what Dragon Breath does. It takes Mightyena pretty low, and it gets the Paralysis. That's very nice. However, Mightyena opts to go for Double Edge, doing a little bit of damage to us, but putting itself into healing range. Sydney then uses a full Restore, fully healing up the Mightyena, but we should be able to take this thing out with a couple of Dragon Breaths from this point, or Sweet Lou can be Sweet Lou and get a critical hit to knock it out. Very nice. This brings out Absol, and my original plan was to lead with Eric, so we swap Eric in, getting an Intimidate of our own off on the Absol, and tanking a Rock Slide pretty nicely. From this point, we can fire off Brick Breaks that are boosted by the held Black Belt, one-shotting the Absol, one-shotting his Shiftry, one-shotting the Cacturn, and finally one-shotting the Crawdont, winning us the first Elite Four battle. Next up for the Elite Four is Phoebe and her Ghost types. My plan here is to lead with Jamie since it has the super effective move Crunch. The lead Dusclops does what it likes to do, going for Protect, just being a little bit annoying. We do get off a Crunch the following turn that takes Dusclops low and gets the special defense drop, which is pretty nice. Shadow Punch does a little bit of chip damage, and then Phoebe opts to go for a full Restore, but another Crunch after the special defense drop one-shots the Dusclops. Her second Dusclops comes out, and this one has Ice Beam, so I swap immediately into Matt. Matt tanks the Ice Beam pretty nicely, and then can fire off a Surf. We then get hit with a Shadow Ball in retaliation, and that's what happens. It's Surf Shadow Ball, and we're sitting at 30 HP, and we need to swap. So I bring Jamie back in, who gets hit with a Shadow Ball on the swap-in, and then can take out the Dusclops with a Crunch. I thought Crunch was the better option here as I go forward on the Bayonet, but it doesn't one-shot it. And then it goes for Grudge, and not really paying attention, I just go for Crunch again, knocking it out, but losing all of the power points. So as the Sableye comes out, I go for Stab Earthquake, and it takes it down to a sliver. Double Team is a little bit concerning, as Phoebe goes for a full restore, and we fire off another Earthquake and knock it out with a follow-up Earthquake. Her last Bayonet comes out, and we fire off a Stab Earthquake that does in fact one-shot, meaning we should have went for that, and we wouldn't have lost all of our power points on Crunch. Now we're into the latter part of the Elite Four where things get very dangerous and we could easily wipe here. Starting out with Glacia and her ice teams. Brick Break with the black belt and the EVs invested is just enough to one-shot both the Celios and the Glalie. And we do just that. The first Celio goes down, Glalie number 1 comes out and falls to a single Brick Break, Celio number 2 comes out and falls to a single Brick Break, and then Glalie number 2 comes out falling to a single Brick Break. Walrein is last. It is not going to fall to a single Brick Break and will one-shot with a Stab Quad Super Effective Ice Beam, so I swap in Matt, who gets hit with a neutral Ice Beam. We can then tag this thing with Toxic, and that is the whole plan here. We tank another Ice Beam on 45 HP, and then heal up a little bit with a Citrus Berry. We are risking a crit, I know. We go for Protect for a little bit of chip from Toxic, and then we fire off a Surf that doesn't do very much damage. Another Ice Beam drops us to 24 HP, and then we can fire off a Protect for a little bit more chip damage. At this point, I could either go for a second Protect or swap, and I opt to swap because I don't want to risk losing Matt here, so I bring in Jamie, unfortunately, on what is going to be a sacrifice. A Quad Super Effective Stab Ice Beam from Walrein knocks out Jamie so that we can safely bring in Eric. Walrein, unfortunately, gets taken to a sliver of health with Toxic, so Phoebe's going to use a full restore, making all of that effort for naught. Except for the fact that we outspeed so we can get back-to-back Brick Breaks, knocking out the Walrein. Losing Jamie is a very sad thing this late in the game. The whole reason we didn't want to risk Matt is for this battle with Drake. Matt is the answer to sweeping this entire team. Of course, the Shelgon likes to go for Protect turn 1, which is a little bit annoying, but no matter. Turn 2, we take it out with a super effective Ice Beam. Out next is Flygon. Flygon gets outsped and taken out with a quad super effective Ice Beam. Next in is Altaria, and it falls the exact same way as the Flygon did before it. And surprisingly, Salamence comes out next. No matter, we still outspeed that thing and can take it out with a quad super effective Ice Beam, and this just leaves Kingdra versus Matt. I decide to stay in and go for Toxic, as the Kingdra goes for Smokescreen. A little bit annoying, but we will deal with it. I then fire off an Ice Beam that takes Kingdra down to just above half, and it goes for Dragon Dance. Now it outspeeds us, and it hits us with a Body Slam, doing a decent amount of damage. Unfortunately, I miss an Ice Beam, and Toxic is starting to rack up. I don't want this thing to be dropped too low as it goes for another Dragon Dance, and then Drake use a full restore. Luckily, we break through the -1 to our accuracy to fire off an Ice Beam that takes out the Kingdra, and that was a nice sweep from Matt. Despite Champion Wallace having a team full of Water-type Pokemon, 3 of them have Ice-type coverage, which could spell disaster for my team. A single Thunderbolt, unfortunately, is not going to be enough to one-shot without a critical hit. A Paralysis would have been nice, but we get neither of those. The other thing that we could really go for is a Miss Blizzard, which we get. That is awesome. I didn't want to lose Dustin, but I didn't really have a better strat. A full restore is just delaying the inevitable, as 2 Thunderbolts then take out the Wailord, bringing out Tentacruel. A critical hit Thunderbolt would have taken out the Tentacruel, but unfortunately we don't get that, and a critical hit Quad Super Effective Ice Beam would have taken us out. It also doesn't happen. After our Citrus Berry, we can take out the Tentacruel with 1 more Thunderbolt, and his last Pokemon with Ice-type coverage comes out, Melodic. I immediately swap into Matt as we tank an Ice Beam that is neutral damage, but it gets the freeze. Luckily, we defrost immediately, putting Melodic on a timer with Toxic. We get hit with another Ice Beam, dropping us below half health, and then we heal up with our Citrus Berry. Now it's time for Toxic Stall. We Protect, as Melodic was going for Toxic, and it does a little bit of chip. Return takes this thing to about just under a quarter of its health gone, and then we tank another Ice Beam on 50 HP. After the chip damage from poison, I go for protect, but Melodic uses recover. I forgot it had that. That is annoying. I don't want to put this thing in range of a heal, so I go for Surf, doing a little bit of chip, and then another Ice Beam leaves us at 5 HP. After the chip from Toxic, Melodic is sitting very low, and we hit it with a return that doesn't quite KO it. We, unfortunately, get KO'd from a Surf, but that was a beautiful play on our end because Wallace saw the kill, so he didn't go for recover. We bring in Dustin. Melodic does still have its Citrus Berry, so it heals up from the Citrus Berry, but the Toxic damage has racked up enough that Toxic takes out the Melodic. That was absolutely insane. His next Pokemon out is his Gyarados. I'm not really scared of the Gyarados. Losing Matt did suck, but a quad super effective Thunderbolt takes out the Gyarados, and Matt's sacrifice was not in vain. Ludicolo then comes out, and we swap into Eric as it goes for a double team, but a stab super effective Aerial Ace takes it out. His last Pokemon is Whiscash, so we're going to let Sweet Lou clean this one up. We swap in on a Surf that is resisted, and then we set up the Sun. Whiscash goes for Amnesia, and we fire off a quad super effective Solar Beam that does well over half. We get hit with another Surf that is dampened by the Sun and not very effective, so it does minimal damage, and another quad super effective Solar Beam seals the battle, wins us the run. We did lose 2 Pokemon, but we made it through. This was a very fun run to do, and as I said earlier in the video, Dragon types, at least in Generation 3, are not overpowered. Hoenn is not very kind to them, especially with 4 of them being quad weak to Ice. We made it through, but there was a lot of luck involved. The team did great, and I did the best I could with what I had. The sacrifices of Matt and Jamie got us this far. I wish I could have done this deathless, but there was absolutely no way that we wouldn't have lost a Pokemon. Still a great run. I had so much fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. If you did, you know the routine. Leave a like, leave a comment, consider subscribing if you've made it this far. Thanks again so much for watching and the continued support, and as always, I will see you on the next one.